Philomythia podcast.
So how did your research go? So good?
You're gonna hate me.
Well, when I told you about it, I was like, Ian does not want to do this, but I'm going to make him do it.
No, that's not it. That's not it. I love the idea. Like, I totally do. Like, when you were like this, and I was like, that sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, cool, I got a few days. And then all of a sudden it was Friday, and I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, shit.
I haven't looked at anything. And then it was Saturday, and I was like, uh-oh. I got to do a few things, and then I'll watch something. I'll do something. I'll read something. I don't even know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something.
Right.
And then
you didn't, you son of a bitch.
I got tired and I fell asleep.
Yeah. So I, like always, I have a bunch of notes, and so we'll just start like we usually do, where I'll just do a factoid of like, here's some crazy history.
Yeah. Because
the history of dice, we don't think about it, but we've used them forever. And we've used them for all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I actually did look at kind of a timeline history of dice.
Mm-hmm. Was it a little, like, picture thing?
Yeah, it's some pictures and some dates.
Yeah, I found that same one, yeah.
And I was like, that's pretty cool.
Was that on the awesomedice.com site?
Bro, it absolutely is.
Dude, I am seriously trying to not buy these Dragons modern dice that they have in their store. I want them so bad.
Really?
Yeah. They're like fucking... Look at these things.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So, should we talk about some dice?
Yeah, man. Let's talk about dice.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Adventurers, NPCs, ogres,
players,
all of yous.
Maybe?
Players.
GMs aren't allowed, though.
GMs, you're fired. Get out. Don't want to see you. You disgust me. Not really. Don't leave.
Please stay.
That's the only people who listen to this podcast are GMs. But today we decided to talk about the history of dice. I picked this topic because I've been listening to a bunch of books about the history of D&D, and certain things get you thinking a little bit. You're like, what is this thing that called dice that has been around for so long?
They called them bones at one point, right?
They were bones.
Yeah.
So in Egypt, they played with, and I'll go through a fast factoid, but they played with actual knuckle bones. They weren't knuckle bones, but they were like small bones from sheep and cattle and things like that.
Right.
You could roll them. They would land on one of four sides. And I actually, have you seen those new D4s where they're curved on certain sides?
No. Oh, wait. Maybe.
They look like they're six-sided, but two of the sides are curved, so it only lands on four.
Yeah. I
think they're designed to kind of act like old school, like ancient knuckle bones, because if you look at the shape of them, there's a weird similarity. Don't know if that's true, but I was like, hey, that's cool.
That's cool.
So, here's the stuff that dice, like the activities that dice have been used for. So, cast divinations.
Right.
So, like even casting lots, like in the Bible, it's a type of like dice throw.
Oh.
It's more like even the I Ching, right? It's like rolling a D2. You get a 1 or you get a 2, right? A lot of times were these flat things, but they had two sides basically.
Right, yeah.
Gambling.
Gambling seems like such a big one.
Well, that came. It's been around forever, but especially like Rome and Greece, they made all these laws because people started loading dice and cheating, playing games. And then, of course, cheating at those games. And finally, RPGs and, like, war games. So, we've used them for so long. It's just crazy. And we're coming at this from a D&D perspective. So, for you non-D&D players, here's some basic terminology. So, when we say things, you're not like, what the fuck are they saying?
What are they saying?
So, in D&D and most tabletop RPGs, we have a certain format that we talk about the dice. So first we say the number. So let's say we're rolling one 20-sided die, right? You're going to say D, and then you're going to say whatever the amount of sides is on the die. So if it's a 6-sided die, you would say 6. If it's a 20-sided die, you would say 20. And then whatever polyhedron you're using.
Give us an example.
I'm going to roll 20 D20s. 20-sided dice.
Oof.
Yeah, big roller.
It's a big roll right there.
There's a number of what we think of as standard dice now. So it's you've got 4-sided dice, D4, 6-sided dice, D6, 8-sided dice, D8, 10-sided dice, D10, 12-sided dice, D12,
12.
and then a D100, which is kind of a hybrid dice. It's not really most of the time how most players use it. It's 2 D10s, and we can talk about that in a bit.
And the D20.
And the D20, that's right. Fun fact, apparently the language around dice is changing, and the Oxford Dictionary, Ian's favorite website in the world, they now say that it's more popular to use the word dice for plural and singular. So die is actually falling out of favor, I guess.
Yeah.
Or usage. Which is interesting because I keep finding myself doing that by accident. Like, I'm gonna roll this dice and I'm rolling 1d6 or something, you know. So I'm like, that's cool, I'll use that.
That's kind of funny you say that, because
Here we go. Ian loves Critical Role.
here comes Ian bringing up Critical Role again.
Spam him with Critical Role stuff. Send him a bunch.
I do. I love it. I'm sorry. I love the that it's entertainment. Like I like what they do. It's fun. I probably would not do well at that table.
You're not allowed to enjoy it.
What?
You're not allowed.
That's cool. I'm still going to. Anyway, during one of the final, they have a guest, and it's Joe
Manganiello.
Yeah, and he uses old verbiage, and he's like, yeah, it's a 1-6, or it's a 4-8.
4-8.
Yeah, instead of saying D,
he says die.
He says die, and so like when every time he rolls, it's a 4-6, and one of them goes, why do you keep saying that? And he goes, I'm old school. That's how we've been saying it since like the 80s. So that's how I say it.
That's funny.
I really love his like weird personality in D&D.
Oh, he's great, man.
But back to the die.
And this is a spoiler, so plug your ears if you don't want to know, because he guest stars in like a big chunk of campaign 1, I believe, like towards the end.
It's not really. It's like 2 episodes, 2 sessions.
Is it? Oh, because he steals, I think, the hand of Vecna.
Yeah.
Like he fucking doesn't tell anybody. He's like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm evil. I gotta take this. Bye.
Well, I can tell you if you want me to tell you how exactly it goes
I've heard
down.
him talk about it, but it's been like 2 years.
It's so big spoiler. You kind of heard a spoiler. This is even bigger.
Yeah.
So they defeat Vecna.
Right.
And then he, as they're all looking at the body of Vecna, he chops off his hand, sticks the hand on there, and goes, later, everybody, and just disappears. And then outside of game, he literally picks his stuff up from the table, stands up, and walks off screen.
That's fucking hardcore, dude.
Right. It was, when I saw it happen, I was like, holy shit. That's huge.
That's a hardcore D&D player right there. Like, I'm off table now, guys. Bye. Like, see ya.
But back to that, he's real old school. So like he has a lot of like Gygax in him. Like he's a big old schooler. So he says that old verbiage. Yeah.
It's interesting. So that means that at some point they were saying the full word, and then they're like, let's just cut it down. Just do the initial.
Yeah.
It's not really much longer to say, but it sounds awkward, at least to my ears, just because I'm not used to it, you know?
Mine too. 4-6. What?
Yeah, what? You're saying it wrong. It's backwards. No, it's not. What are you doing? Really quick, there was a really great video it's really funny. It's like 6 minutes or 720 Moonrat Media, and it's the history of dice. And it's entertaining and hilarious and very clever. And so I use this as a big source. I don't know tons about like just non-D&D history. And so I was like, okay, well, what about this? What about that? So that was really highly recommended. It's from like 2014. It was still great.
Oh, cool.
So I'm just going to go through some of this, the factoid stuff, the non-D&D related stuff, pretty quick. So earliest recorded use of dice, which was D4s, goes all the way back to 3100 BCE, before Common Era, with the royal game of which was played in Sumeria. I have no idea how it was played, but I know there's a video of like some stodgy historian like teaching some YouTuber how to play. So if I can find that, I'll link to it.
Crazy.
There's some other notables. So there's a game called Sinet from Egypt where they use dice. The earliest dice and evidence they found came somewhere from Egypt or Mesopotamia, like that kind of area of the world.
Right. I saw that same thing.
The earliest set was found in Basur Hoyuk, which I'm probably totally murdering that, somewhere in Iraq, I think.
Oh, crazy.
But again, from like the Sumerian time period, roughly.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians also played a game called Ostragali, which used knuckle bones that we talked about.
Oh, yeah. That's such a cool, the idea of the evolution of that. So that's cool.
Right. Well, you think about even like, seems totally random unless you're a big music fan, but like Rush's...
roll the bones, bro.
Roll the bones. Yeah, that's what it is.
Dude.
Or consult the bones, like...
Right.
I mean, we've used dice for a long time, which is kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, it's roll the dice, man. Roll the dice. Take the chance.
And this is just a note, we already talked about it, but knuckle bones land on 4 sides, which is similar to these new D4s that are coming out.
Right.
There was an article, I guess, making the rounds that the earliest dice were associated with backgammon. They even mention it in Lost. Apparently that is highly disputed. Mm-hmm. I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to comment, but
right.
Some people claim the first set of dice were found in an archaeological site called the Burnt City, but backgammon is like 5,000 years old. It's really old. I'd love to learn how to play it, because I have no idea how you play it. It was always around, I'm like, this looks boring when I was little. Like, this is stupid.
I read about that Burnt City thing, and that's highly disputed.
Yeah, highly disputed. Like, very controversial. So
highly disputed.
Apparently it's been debunked a bunch, and then the article will come back up and,
right.
Doing the internet thing. During the Greek civilization, you had, like, Sophocles and Herodotus making erroneous claims about where dice were invented.
Well, that's crazy. I didn't know they had anything to do with dice.
Well, the Greeks were kind of obsessed with geometry and numbers. And,
okay.
And we're going to get into the Platonic solids, because that's actually why I wanted to talk about this. But they were pervasive during Greek and Roman times. Especially the Romans fucking loved gambling. They'd gamble on anything.
Huh.
And they started making all these laws against using dice. They had dice guilds and like gamer groups. Not necessarily for RPGs, but dice was a big part of the culture apparently, which I didn't know.
Right. Well, the fact that you say gamer like that,
mm-hmm.
My mom works in telecommunications, and she does a lot of phone installations for casinos
mm-hmm.
and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So she was saying something about one of her clients. She's like, blah, 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 gaming. And I like looked over at her and she goes, gambling.
Yeah.
Not that. And I was like, oh, because it's a word they use for gambling is gaming.
Right. And I don't want to talk about this yet, but it really brings up the point that gaming in this way has to do with fortune and chance, whether it's D&D or gambling or divining. There's this element of the unknown, which is really cool. And then circa 1860s, Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers show up, and they start doing a bunch of board games. The ones we all know, Monopoly Live.
The 1860s?
That's when they started.
Fucking Christ!
Yeah, because they were a big competitor for like TSR in the 1970s, because they'd been around for 100 plus years. So they were very well established.
Wow.
I think Hasbro came around sometime not too far. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But I think Hasbro's been around for quite a long time.
Huh.
So yeah, board games really became a big thing. And then we start to get into D&D time. And we have to jump back a little bit because there's the whole wargaming side of it. War games mainly used D6s, right?
Mm. That's
really all we had for a long time. The first miniature war games came out of Prussia, and then after the Franco-Prussian War in the 1800s, it just spread throughout the world, apparently. So Prussia wins, they beat France, and then their method of conducting war and strategy just spreads like wildfire, apparently.
That reminds me of something. I have had this itch in the back of my mind due to you
mm-hmm.
and listening to historical stuff, specifically the history, you know which one I'm talking about, hardcore history,
mm-hmm.
and learning about some historical events, because you do GMing so well, and I know that there's a part of that stems from you actually knowing historical stuff.
For sure.
And seeing cause and effect on a bigger scale, and I'm like, I need to do that.
Man, hardcore history, if you want, if I didn't care about history, but I hardcore history is like Dan Carlin is the internet's history teacher, in my opinion. He doesn't talk about everything. He talks about what he's interested in, but the what's the wars between Rome and Carthage, for instance. I fucking love that era. It's so insane. That's when Hannibal takes the elephants across the Alps and like threatens all the Celtic tribes. He's like, you fucking better help me or I'm gonna murder all of you. Like, it's so savage and crazy, dude.
The whole reason I'm even saying this is because you talk about the Prussian War.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting for me. I'm like, oh wow, wars change things.
That whole time, because all of that leads directly to World War One. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
So there's all this political stuff, but you should. And I can give you some digs. And then 1950s and 70s in America, I don't know about the rest of the world, but like wargaming just fucking, it was the thing. It was the D&D of the time. And you had Avalon Hill was like the company.
Right.
There were some others, but Avalon Hill was the big one. And Avalon Hill and TSR were big competitors, rivals for like 20 years. They hated each other.
Oh, damn.
Hated each other. It's crazy. It's Gygax's fault. But anyways, they primarily used D6s, but apparently naval war games would use D20s. And D20s weren't D20s. They had 0 through 9 written on them twice, so you'd roll them as percentile dice.
Oh, okay.
And then early editions of D&D primarily used D6s. And then AD&D first edition was the first time like the books recommended using the full set.
Oh.
And that's because Gary Gygax saw there was a company called Creative Publications which made really shitty D20s. Like, you can look up pictures, you're like, wow, that's a shitty D20. But they were the only company in America, so they would use them, and then they started using some company in Japan. But the polyhedrals were originally designed, like the set we used, to teach kids about the Platonic solids. So they were an education tool, and then Gygax and a few others in TSR saw them, and they're like, hey, we want the D20s because that's a weird die, so we're going to keep that, and then we'll donate the rest. And they're like, wait, that's a big waste. Why don't we find ways to use the other dice?
Oh.
So if you notice, like D4s, D8s, D10s are mainly damage dice. Mm-hmm. D12s are usually hit point dice for like barbarians. D6s are a special case because they have a way longer tradition.
I don't know if you mentioned it and I missed it, but historically there's one other dice that I think it was from Japan. It was a 14-sided dice historically.
I don't know about historically. You sound like you know more than me, but there are a bunch of non-standard dice that they use now. There's like a D22.
Oh, weird.
And we also use all the time, like you could do a D2, which is a coin flip, right? If you took a D4, cut it in half, divide it by 2, or a D3, divide a D6 by 2.
I have a D3.
Do you? Nice. Do you have an actual physical one?
Uh-huh.
Nice. There's also like D5s, I guess, if you go onto the fandom site about the history of D&D. Yeah. And that's basically all the like factuals right there. There's a lot more details. I don't think most people are as fascinated by it as I am, so we won't get into the nitty-gritty.
But what about the Platonic solids, though?
So Platonic solids, the thing that I started getting fascinated by was the fact that there's only 5 Platonic solids. There's 6 standard dice. The D10 is not a Platonic solid.
Oh, really? You
can call it a pentagonal trapezohedron.
Whoa.
Or a deltahedron. And basically it's a multi-sided pyramid. So it's like a 5 or more sides, but it's geometrically considered a pyramid. And if you actually look at the way the triangles are shaped on a D10, they have this weird on the bottom side. If you're looking at it as the apex facing up, it has this weird shape to it, and that's how they get them all to fit together.
That is weird.
Where polyhedrons, Platonic solids, it's always the same shape replicated, and all the edges touch.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So I don't know a lot about the geometry. It definitely inspires me to learn more about geometry, which, again, I feel like D&D is this gateway into learning about the world. Like, ooh, how does statistics work? How does geometry work? Like, I want to know more about how these dice function.
Right.
But basically, the Platonic solids they all corresponded to a traditional element.
Right.
So the D4, the tetrahedron, corresponded to fire. The icosahedron, which is the D20, corresponded to water. The octahedron corresponded to air. The hexahedron, D6, corresponded to earth. And the cube has traditionally always been associated with earth. That's always been its thing. And then the dodecahedron was aether or spirit. And so it's interesting because especially in like, this is D&D adjacent, but especially in like, say Magic the Gathering, you always have like the 5 elements. And so to the Greeks, numbers weren't just these cold things, they all have personalities. So for me, it's interesting to think about like, it'd be kind of cool to have like a version of D&D where like if you cast Fireball, you roll a bunch of D4s.
Yeah.
Because that's the tetrahedron is associated with fire, right?
Right.
Or if you're making emotional rolls, you roll the D20. You know, you think about how the D20 is a swingy dice, and emotions you can think of as like very swingy as well. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
And I wanted to just kind of break that down and talk about it a little more.
I wonder if anyone's ever, I'm sure they have, made custom dice that are specific to the platonic solids and the elements that they're associated with. Usually
nowadays, because of our kind of scientific way of looking at the world, we usually downplay geometry being associated to mysticism. And anytime you start talking about the traditional elements and humors, that's the other thing is too, the traditional humors are associated with elements.
Right.
So like you have like sanguine is associated with fire, is associated with a D4. But it would be cool if somebody did where if they like kind of themed them in that way. Yeah, it'd be super cool.
Right.
There was one, oh yeah, here we go. So the non-standard dice that we have now, you have a D22, a D24, a D30, which would be fun to have.
That's weird.
34, 48, 50, 60, and 120. And this is an assumption, but I think they started using the Euclidean solids, which were like all the sides didn't have to be even, basically. I could be wrong about that because, again, my knowledge of geometry is very low. But the little research I did, it seems like that's what it was like platonic solids is everything's even and symmetrical, and then you get outside of that and you can do, you know, asymmetrical type of shapes and things like that.
Right.
And if you look at some of the Euclidean solids, they are fucking weird looking.
Are they?
They're real weird looking. So even though it's kind of weird when you're talking about D&D, I really like the idea of like, well, what if you personified the dice? Like, what personalities do they have? Like, how do they act? Because the D20 definitely has a personality. And if you played D&D, you know sometimes the dice, they ain't giving you an inch.
No.
Like, our player, Jerry, yesterday, he could not successfully roll to save his life. It was crazy.
Dude, it was insane.
It was all 7s. It was, like, so low, man.
7s and 8s.
7s and 8s. Yeah, so we've used dice forever. We've used them as this cultural artifact, basically.
Right.
Which I thought was super, super interesting. That was most of my research that I got through. I'm trying to think if there were any other details. Oh, the guy who patented the D10, he patented it in 1981. His name was Clifford E. Polite.
Nice.
Apparently.
Clifford Polite, thank you.
Clifford Polite. That was very polite of you. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, I was going to show you these, too. I think these are D20s. Somebody on Etsy, and I'll post this in the
dribbly doos.
The doobly doo.
Oh, I've seen those, dude. I want them.
The cylinder?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are crazy, man.
Yeah, I've seen a few. I wouldn't really roll those. I would just keep those as just like, oh, they're cool.
Seems like they'd roll for a while.
And like it's like those like I've seen them on like there's the Bard dice and there's the Necromancer dice and there's all of these sets that you can get and they're very weird shaped, some of them.
Right.
And when I look at them, I'm like, I don't want to roll that, but I do want that set because it's really cool.
I mean, that's a big thing now is like collecting dice just as an aesthetic object.
There's some, man. Like I've seen people that are selling just a D20 handcrafted out of something and lots of love and tenderness put into this one D20. It's like $180.
I've been seeing some YouTube reviews like this is a $200 D20. Is it worth it? Like made out of some crazy material. Like not if you don't have a lot of money.
Right. If you're broke, then no. But if you have money, then I mean, why not? Who cares if you're going to be spending it? That's cool.
Yeah. But it's interesting how these dice now kind of symbolize all the fun we have in D&D. So the set when you see it. Like when I see like the polyhedral dice, it's like, ooh, fun.
Right.
It's time to have fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's time for adventure.
I have my 6-sided set that I use for blades right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got my black obsidian, like black on black obsidian set on this little stand right here for when we play.
Nice.
And I get my rolling tray next week.
Ian's, was it your girlfriend that bought it?
Yeah.
Or did you buy it?
She gave me a gift certificate to Wormwood.
Okay.
So I covered the rest of it.
Ian's getting a wormwood dice. Is it a tower or a tray?
No, just a tray, a rolling tray.
If you don't know what wormwood is, you should check it out because they're like the nicest, most handcrafted dice towers and trays you'll ever see, and they're
so
fucking
good.
expensive.
I think that they're
Stupid
probably
expensive.
the most widely accepted as like top quality trays. If you go on like Etsy, there are people that are much, they're one person crafting something, so they're more expensive, and
It's
can
going to
get
be more expensive.
wild with those people.
Yeah. Dice and dice trade. We'll call it dice culture. It's
Right.
a whole cottage industry now where you can like buy gemstone dice and you'll get a little warning like, oh, don't roll these on hard surfaces or
Right.
they might crack. And it's like, holy shit, what am I paying for here?
There's so many dice makers out there now, and there's so many really cool ones. The world of dice, like you just said, is huge.
Yeah, and of course it comes back to, it's tied to the resurgence of D&D, and I think also just our generation and the younger generation, like everybody knows pretty much what D&D now is now, where before it was this obscure thing, but it's just part of the culture at this point. I think we can safely say.
I think so. I mean, especially with, one of the, we bring it up every once in a while, but even just season 1 of Stranger Things, where they kind of talk about D&D and you see them roll a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
they make references to their friend group as the party, and
Mm-hmm.
and with that becoming so big, I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes to like, what is this D&D thing? Like, I had another conversation recently with somebody that we both know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say who they are. And they've listened to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying something, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but they were like, wait, it's not a video game? And I go, what?
Oh, I've had people say that to me too.
And I go, they go, well, I thought it was...
you said she.
I thought it's a video game that you guys play. And I said, I'm not real great at communication. I go, what the fuck is wrong with you? What do you mean a video game? You've listened to the podcast. What are you talking about?
Right.
And then they're like, well, I don't know what it is. And I was like, it's a shared creative endeavor that we're creating a story, and we use dice and our imaginations to have fun with it. And they're like, so wait, there's not like, how do you play? I'm like, I feel like what you're asking me is, we talk through things. Yes, we say words and create what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we might have a map with some stuff.
Right.
But no, we're not playing a video game.
It's funny because my housemates who are older,
Right.
they thought the same thing. Even when I've like been like, no, it's not a video game, they would still be like, oh, it's a video game, because they see me on the computer,
Right.
doing computery stuff. So there's they think there's this correlation. Oh, they're on a computer, so it's a video game, obviously. But really, it's you're doing group shared storytelling via conversation.
Yeah.
And the dice are there to mediate the randomness. So it's to cut out that old cowboys and Indians problem that we all ran into as kids, where you're like, bam, bam, I shot you. You're dead. No, I'm not.
Nope.
Yeah, you are. Nope, didn't happen.
You missed me.
So you make the dice kind of the arbiter of
What happens?
whether, like, okay, I swing my sword, but you don't know if the sword's going to hit. So you roll a number to kind of interpret the successes and failures, But that is very hard to conceptualize.
It is.
Like if you didn't grow up with it, or you don't understand it. But it's really like reading a book, but it's a book you're creating.
Right, and you're part of it. Like, you are choosing things. Part of what's happening is you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think when people start to get a little bit of a hint of what that is, they're like, oh.
That's different than I thought.
Is it fun? Yes.
Yes.
It is fun.
Why do you think I spend so much time doing it?
If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. I hear it all the time from people. Oh man, I wish I want to play D&D. And my thought is always, so why don't you? Oh, I just don't have time. Well, if you don't make time, you will never have time.
Right.
So make time for the things you want to do. I mean, it sounds brutal, but like, just like people who want to go to the gym all the time, they find a way to make that happen.
Right.
It's the same thing with us. We find ways to be able to do this how we want to. That's how it goes.
I mean, it's the brutal truth of being an adult, which is you have to decide what your priorities are.
Right.
Like what's important enough that you're going to spend your time and attention on, because your time and attention is an extremely precious resource at this point. Resource. Can't speak all of a sudden. But it's a precious resource. It is very finite. So you only got so much of that.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, especially a lot of our extended friend circle, their attention bandwidth is just maxed out a lot of the time. Where they might have the time, but they're just like, they have too much other stuff taking up the mental space.
Right.
And I mean, that's valid. But the thing is, if you play RPGs and you have a good table, you have a good game group, you realize that this helps clear up space. Like, you feel better. You don't feel overwhelmed like, oh, now I have to do all this stuff. You're like, oh yeah, that's what I was waiting for the whole week,
Oh yeah, when you hit a really good session in D&D, it really does. It pulls you out of your life for a few hours to live in this other world and have fun with a bunch of people, joking, telling a story that you're part of.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's so much fun. I hope everyone's having fun.
For me, it's like the best one of those really good movies like you saw in the theater and it was amazing, or a book you read that was amazing, but it's times 100 because you're in the world.
Yeah.
Like, in your head, you're sharing this hallucination with the other players and the DM, and you, like Ian said, you're creating it as you go along.
Yeah. It's
happening in the moment. It's not just a movie playing on a track. And it's not even a video game that might be open world, but there are boundaries. No, you can, as a player, you can shatter all the boundaries the DM has set up.
Yeah.
You might die.
And you might piss people off.
Yeah. But you have a lot of agency, at least ideally. Every table's different, but ideally the players have agency to just wreck the china shop.
Yeah. That's where it's fun.
Yeah.
I love the getting a story and feeling like you're able to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean I want to go, like Eric's saying, I don't want to break everything. I want to play my character in a world that's like ready for me to break, basically.
For me, I mean, we played a session last night, and as a GM, I just am over the moon when the world and all the planning I put in. It's not that things go according to plan, but suddenly the world comes alive.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these NPCs and the characters are interacting with them and they're making choices that feel like there are stakes, and the world suddenly starts to breathe. And whether the players go into left field or they follow the track or they do something I could never predict, it's an absolute joy.
It is. And just like we say, I'm not going to even talk about it, but once we finish this campaign or we take a break from it, we'll chat with you all about it.
And we're doing the Sunless Citadel, but I've heavily homebrewed it.
Yeah, it's so great.
Heavily gonzified it, so it's got kind of a old school D&D feel in terms of just like, instead of like a typical ogre or something you'd find in the dungeon, there are giant ants that are vicious and just fuck the party up hardcore.
Oh yeah, we've almost lost a few people fighting these things.
Yeah, so it's Sunless Citadel is not fun to read through, but it's sure fun to play through. So props to I think, was it Seb Cook? I don't remember. You know what? I'm going to look it up.
I think that there's also something to be said. I think a lot of the really popular adventures, probably like reading through them is kind of boring. But when you actually get them on the table, you're like fixing the little piece. You're like, this doesn't work here at my table. I'm going to do this with that part. And
right.
I think that a lot of those adventures are really cool. Like, they have a lot to them. Like,
right.
This is going to sound strange, but do you know which one that's like a new one that I'm like kind of like thirsting for some reason? Rime of the Frost Maiden.
That one does seem fun.
Yeah, and there's some weird like mechanics in it that make it a little bit different.
Right. Yeah.
Not that I'm saying like we're gonna run that next or anything, but like that one's been in my brain. I'm like, now that it's been out for a little while, I'm like,
Right. Yeah. I think it'd be fun to ideally to just play some version of all the campaigns.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to ever happen, but it'd be fun.
Right. It'd be a lot.
Bruce Cordell is the author of Sunless Citadel, the original 3.5 edition, or maybe it's even 3rd edition. I have the original copy of when it came out, which is weird. It's like, oh, I have an original thing. But it was the first adventure for 3rd edition, I believe, that came out.
Oh, okay.
So not even 3.5. The big learning experience for like reading through this dungeon and running it is like, you don't really know if the adventure is good until you actually put it into play.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll be able to tell like as I run more published stuff just by reading through it, like, oh, this is going to be good. But I read through it, I'm like, this is dumb. Like, why was this created? This is stupid. But then playing through it, it works great.
Yeah.
The way the dungeon is designed totally threatens the players and like keeps them on their toes, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's how I feel like, because I'm going to be running a Saltmarsh campaign soon. And that's reading through Saltmarsh now that I've like read it a bit. I'm like, okay, I actually think this will be fun. I think there's a lot of stuff here to play with for the players that is interesting. So I'm excited about that. And I'm obviously, like Eric has done with Sunless Citadel, I'm home brewing a bunch of stuff that's just kind of, it's gonna be Saltmarsh, but just slapping it around a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, if you like GMing, the big thing with it is the creativity.
Yeah.
You have creative license. D&D seems like one of those rare places where like, hey, plagiarize, steal, take whatever you need, mix it up, and then recycle it, you know?
And even on that note, going back a tiny bit to our subject here, dice. Use, different things for different stuff if you want to. Like, if you see something that's like, oh, this is a 4d6 roll for the damage. Oh, give them 3d4 if they want, or something. Like, because on average, you'll probably roll higher with 3d4 for an average, but your peak rolls will be higher with a 3d6.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of fun you can have with messing around with different dice rolls or using dice from different systems within your game just to take that little sample of, oh, I like what they did with this.
Right.
I'm going to take those and use it here.
And certain dice are really fun to roll, like Blades in the Dark.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another system. Like, you're rolling big pools of dice, which is like multiple dice. So, like a big pool of D6s, like having those in your hand,
yeah, it's
super fun. And you know what? That is the other thing I was going to say that I wanted to talk about is I'm interested in how different... because really, like, if we talk about rules mechanics, it's really usually built around a single die type and how you interpret the rolls. So, like, D&D is D20, Blades in the Dark is D6, Cthulhu is percentile, which is 2D10.
Yeah.
And you interpret one as the ones and one as the tens column, so you can get 1 to 100. It's interesting to see how that affects the gameplay and how it affects your psychology. Like, playing Blades in the Dark is not at all like playing D&D.
Oh, yeah, not at all.
You're in a totally different frame of mind, and it's not just the die rolling, but I think it's fascinating to see how that's affected by just changing the die type.
Right.
And, as I've studied the history of just the tabletop industry, there's been all these phases where, like, after D&D kind of fell out of fashion in the 80s, everybody, and D10s came out, like, everybody went to, like, 2D10 systems. So all the, like, people trying to innovate mechanics. And then there was, like, diceless role-playing. And then in the 90s, you went back to like D6 pools with the World of Darkness. And so if you look at the history of tabletop RPGs, like all these companies have done super creative stuff with their mechanic system. And I just think for me, it's fascinating because I want to figure out how that works.
Yeah.
And a lot of these game designers, they're really creative people trying to express that creativity through game mechanics.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it.
Yeah,
I just think it's.
But dice are cool.
Dice are.
Sorry,
cool.
what were you gonna say?
Dice.
Man.
I have a problem.
No dice.
When I start looking at them and I want to just buy them, all of them, and every time I'm about to hit buy now, I'm like, Ian,
you don't need this.
You have sets. Like, go if you're really feeling that itch, go buy a new Chessex set. Like, just go get one. $12. It's fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
$45 for dice. Don't do that.
Woo! Hoot nanny. I mean, if you play RPGs, you're probably a collector. That's the other thing is like, hey, I could with Ian. I mean, if you're buying $45 dice, doesn't really count. But hey, I don't have to spend $40 on a book. I'll just buy $12 dice.
Right.
You know, so it's a way to keep collecting. But there's a lot of cool dice. I recently started using D&D Beyond more, and I bought myself a set. It was like 6 sets of virtual dice.
Which set did
that
you
are
get?
really cool. I don't know. Let's look it up.
Because
I don't remember the name of it because they're super colorful, and it was from some actual play.
I know which ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it gave you like 6 or 7 sets for the price of basically one.
Yeah. I was like, I'll buy that. I didn't realize that when you subscribe, you get a monthly set of dice, which is really cool. So I didn't know I had the Clockwork dice.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I almost bought the Vecna dice.
Oh, that would be sweet. I still don't know the layout of the
D&D Beyond.
D&D Beyond.
Well, the other thing that's really cool about D&D Beyond that we can utilize too is you can roll from your phone.
Oh yeah, I was testing that out. I'm like, this is what I wanted from Roll20 app. What the? I'm so mad and so relieved at the same time. So angry. So much money spent on Roll20 and it's just fucking bullshit. Battle for the Beyond dice pack.
Nice. That's cool.
I'm using the Layla. They're like the purple.
Nice.
The purple dice.
Have you experimented at all on the backside of D&D Beyond as the GM yet?
Not really. I've just been buying, like, I bought the core books, and I'm going to try building some homebrew stuff and, building more characters just to see how the website works.
Right.
I really like the front, like, the UI is great. So the way the character sheets look, and you can retheme them. It's definitely the Apple of, like, D&D sites, which it should be because it's now officially owned by WotC.
Yeah, it's super cool. Cody runs his table from D&D Beyond. And so like you can build encounters in there.
You can build your whole campaign world.
Yeah, and it's all just like boop right there, and you can just click, like you can have almost like your DM screen, like you can see all of your players' AC, what their hit points are at, what statuses they should have.
That's cool. So we could even do like have the Foundry table, but then have like the campaign world in D&D Beyond and jump back and forth. I'm seeing this new video on the front page of D&D Beyond called "The Fiend of Hollowmine."
Yeah.
And I'm seeing Mercer's face, and also who's the new player for Campaign 3?
You're talking about Robbie.
Robbie. I really like Robbie.
Yeah, that's a new actual play that just dropped just the other day.
Nice. Who's DMing for that?
I think it's a girl. I don't know what her name is.
I see her on there. I see 4 faces. The other 2 I don't recognize, but
yeah, it's that literally just dropped just like the other day. I think they
nice.
I want to say they recorded it maybe during Brennan.
Okay, why that was going?
Right, I don't know though for sure.
Okay.
Because there's another thing where some of those people are also in another single like kind of one-shot campaign.
One shot. Nice.
But Robbie's great. He's such a good addition. Yeah, like, he's not.
He fits right in.
He's not in it anymore.
Oh, he's not?
No, he's
not in Campaign 3?
No.
What? I thought he was going to be permanent.
No, he's not permanent. He
oh, that's a bummer. They should have kept him.
You're probably like an episode, or you're probably a few episodes away from when he leaves. His character.
Well,
leaves.
That's a bummer. Yeah. I hope he comes back.
He
was a good addition.
He's still like we've seen, like he still has good rapport with them. Everything's fine. His character, like the story was just over.
Right. So he's like Roll20 adjacent, and I guess it took a long time for the one girl. I don't remember her name.
Abria?
No, the player.
Laura.
Is it Ashley? Who's playing Fern?
Fern is Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley, because she was kind of in it, and she kind of come in and out. But it took her a long time to really be a player, like a main group.
In campaign 1, because she was always out doing work.
She was going to like New York and stuff.
So she was always working. So she would play when she could, and then due to the popularity of Critical Role and them basically owning Critical Role now instead of it being part of Geek and Sundry.
Yeah.
I think that allowed her to free up her schedule a little bit, because when campaign 2 started, she was full time. Like she was there.
Yeah. They probably are able to pay her and
Right. I think it just
Cool stuff.
yeah, I think things opened up and
That's cool.
she was able to make it more of a priority.
Yeah.
These are just guesses because I love Ashley Johnson.
Oh, she's great.
She's so great.
It's my association with Ashley Johnson. This is very weird. I'm about to date myself again in terms of my age. I remember her as a young actress from What Women Want because she played Mel Gibson's daughter.
Oh, really?
And she's like the bitchy daughter. She's like, Dad, I hate you. Stop embarrassing me. And then suddenly she was on Critical Role. I'm like, this is weird.
That's funny.
I feel odd about this. You're supposed to be in movies, not D&D.
Well, and that's the Taliesin Jaffe.
Yeah.
He's also a child star as well.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he grew up in Hollywood, and it was funny on one of the episodes of something. I think Sam goes, "Yeah, like in this movie," and he says the name of it. He goes, "Yeah, I love that movie. It's my favorite movie." And then Taliesin looks over and goes, "I'm in that movie," and he goes, "No, you're not." And he goes, "Yes, I am. I'm." And then he says who he is, and Sam's like, "Holy shit! You're in that movie!" And this little like fanboy moment happens with the cast for Taliesin. And then Sam's like, "Can I get your autograph?" And he goes, "No."
That sounds like Taliesin.
It was a funny little moment. There's a lot of those little seeing their table kind of run like the way they run it. It's fun to see these little like jokes that they have with each other because I see those same things at our table. You know, these funny, stupid things we joke about that are just dumb.
And they're also kind of like bring the group together too.
Right, for sure.
But dice are awesome. D&D's awesome, and
if you don't play D&D or some sort of game, get your life together. What are you doing?
What are you even doing?
Get all your shit. Put it in a backpack. Do something with it. Just get it together.
For God's sake, realize that D&D is not a computer game. There are D&D computer games.
Yes.
But it's not a computer game.
It's not a video game.
Yeah, it's not a video game. But I'm going to leave our listeners with this.
All right.
With all the playing and all the stuff going on, a lot of times D&D, you're focused on yourself, your character, or you're the GM, your game. And I think it's a really good thing to remember to ask yourself, how can I make D&D better? How can I make my table, like the game at my table, the best it can possibly be? Whether it's researching dice or using the lazy dungeon master, whatever you're going to do. I feel like that can absolutely bring the level of your game up and make your players want to play even more.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of complaints online, and I think a lot of it is kind of this semi-entitled antagonism, where it's like you're expecting everybody else to kind of cater to you, whether you're a GM or a player, when really if you think about offering something to the table and trying to make the experience for everybody better, you might be surprised at the results.
Yeah, for sure.
But we love you.
Love you.
I love you, Ian.
Love you, Eric.
And everybody have a fantastic day.
Please.
Stay sweaty.
Use that fucking force damage.
Force damage. Force damage. Force damage. Force damage.
Like, share, subscribe.